Following year, now we go back to another builder coming on the same scene, and the builder is none other than Brian Skinner, who with his wife Eileen have sailed for Broxbourne, God knows how many years. Brian was a top class engineer of all kinds. He could build in wood. He lectured in metallurgy and all kinds of things at various colleges, and he and Eileen lived on what was one of the wartime airfields, which was just at Spellbrook, just north of Sawbridgeworth in Hertfordshire, and the airdrome concrete was still there, lots of places, and there were dwellings on it, and he and Eileen lived in a mobile home there.
Yeah.
And he had some nice sheds outside, and he was very, very good at building Flying 15s. And in fact, he built about 6, I suppose, and he was such a brilliant engineer and everything with it that I really believe he was the only one in the whole country that could properly measure a Flying 15 when it was built to what Arthur Fox himself would have expected. And like many other classes, they find somebody to interpret the tolerances, and the shape gets slightly altered and one thing leads to another.
Mm-hmm.
But he built the wooden Flying 15 for the then secretary of the Flying 15 class, Sarah Flower from Lowestoft, who used to sell the 15 from the harbour there, and also her brother James Flower. And Brian Skinner built a boat for James Flower with his intention of going to Ireland for the Northern Ireland Championships on Lough. What's a big lake called Northern Ireland Lake? I think at that moment it's a job to get all these names on my team.
Right, you're doing very well.
But there was a very, very big field there, about 80, 90 boats, and it's enormous. It's like an inland sea, that lake. And James Flower sailed his boat, and he called it the Young Pretender. Rather strange. I don't think he was Scotch or anything like that, and his name wasn't Charlie. Anyway, he was the first British Flying 15 he and his both first British pair to win the Northern Ireland Championships.
Yeah.
So anyway, about that time I talked to him about going into moths, and he decided to have a stab at it, and he'd start building in using West epoxies and all that. And his first effort was actually oak agar.
Oh, yeah.
And we had one of the better helmsmen in Broxbourne was Richard Goldklang.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked Richard and Brian into letting him use the oak agar at the next championships, which was at Chew Valley Lake yet again. And Richard was very, very good. He sailed very well, and it did Brian a bit of good, showing that his boats were pretty fast. And Richard Goldklang won that event at Chew Valley in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't carry on with moths at all, but he was quite a good sailor. When he was still at college, I used to employ him on a Saturday to help teach at the sailing school, along with various other young laser sailors and that from our club, you know. Right, now we come to the period for the next, 13 years that Toby won in Wine and Viner. Why was it called Viner? Because when Fred Monk Senior decided to go into moths, and he went to see John Claridge, and he said, want you to build a boat as near as you can to Twits and as light as you can. But something had changed at that time. The shape had changed very slightly, and it was really due to a carpenter joiner in our club called John Doherty. And John built the boat interpreting the tolerances to the full extent, and instead of the bow of his boat being a fair curve, whichever way you interpret it, a fair curve is really a continual curve, by exploiting it he was able to drop the bow down to a curve with a pronounced hump, if you like, in the middle. And the boat was exhibited at the Crystal Palace show. I think it was Crystal Palace. I don't think they'd gone to the Alexandra Palace then. Anyway, the boat was accepted, and John Claridge happened to be there, and he saw what had been done, and so he copied it. So Fred Monk paid him quite a lot of money to build 2 or 3 boats, and young Freddie had 751, 752 was then ordered by another lad in Broxbourne named Richard Hannay, and he had an off licence in Green Street, Enfield. And he was very, very fond of wines, and so German wine, and that's why 752's got its name, Weiner.
Yeah.
Anyway, poor Richard fell into hard times, financial times, and he had to leave, and he wanted money in a hurry, so I bought 752 from Richard Hannay.
Oh.
So that was a start, really, that very, very fast boat. And of course, as on the record, Toby sailed it successfully at all the usual places. The only one different I can see on the list, or 2 are different. Let's start. The first one is Wroxham, Hunts, Shoe Valley, and then Parkston Yacht Club. Now, Parkston Yacht Club has had a very eminent moth member as Commodore for quite a few years, on and off, and it was Eric Scoble, who started in the early days at Hoo Marina sailing his moth, and that time he was manager of the marina at Hoo. And he and Charlie Reeves, I remember going when I'd first into moths, going down there for an open meeting, and it was so rough I had to stand up to my waist helping 2 or 3 of them launch, but I didn't dare go out myself to begin with. So Eric was always a good sailor. I think he had some perhaps matrimonial trouble, so he ended up down in Poole, where he became manager of the Rank Marina in Poole Harbour. And of course, with their close associations with Parkston, he became Commodore. I think he'd been Commodore there on and off for quite a while. So we were able to get our championships at Parkston Yacht Club, and that was quite interesting, really, in the confines of the harbour. It was lovely, just round the corner from Sutherland Bay, of course. But at least we didn't have to try and come in or out the Swatchway, which any yachtsman knows is pretty impassable on the ebb. So there we are, that was one thing different. And the following year, also in 1988, we had it somewhere different, and it was at King George Reservoir. And King George, another goldfish bowl. The launching is never particularly nice at these reservoirs. That was a reasonably successful championship, but it goes on then to Broxbourne, and then Hunts, Broxbourne, Buell, back at Buell for our 60th anniversary. Heckling Broad. Oh, that was a long gap, wasn't it? 1993 this was. We were back at Hickley, and we went back to Wine, with Wine to Hunts, and then there's still 2 more to go. Another new venue came, and the first time ever in 1995 it was at Northampton.
Yeah.
And of course it's been at Northampton for a long time and enough now. Another different one that I didn't sail in, and that was the last one that Toby won, which was at Rutland Water. I wish I'd been able to go because I'd done 4 or 5 open meetings in the Flying 15 at Rutland. But for some reason or the other I didn't go to Rutland in the Moth that year.